This is the Silver and Black Podcast with Rob Thompson and RJ Ochoa.
Wemby for three, butter.
Rob and RJ get you inside the San Antonio Spurs, along with everything NBA.
Hammers it down.
It's the Silver and Black Podcast with Rob and RJ, part of the San Antonio Sports Star Podcast Network at sasportstar.com. Now, here are the guys.
Our team, with Victor and the likes, are going to be in the spotlight. And Brian Windhorst was on Pat MacAfee yesterday. And let me tell you, Wendy came down to San Antonio. It's been about a month ago. Do you remember this, RJ?
And fell in love.
My gosh, where did Pop and the crew take Wendy? This guy bought a cowboy hat. He went back home to L.A. wearing a Stetson and brand new Tecovas boots. I mean, listen to him. This is the next iteration of Wendy. Was this from his Socialist Collective?
This was on McAfee.
Oh, that's right. This is on McAfee. Yeah. His Highness hosted Wendy. This is what went down.
Before we move on, let me say something about Wembanyama. Some star player, I predict, is going to look at what's going on in San Antonio and say, I want to be there.
Oh, look at that.
Go put me next to that guy. I don't know who it's going to be, but somebody is going to get – it's probably not going to be a guy who's a number one on his team now. My guess is it's going to be a guy who's maybe in the middle of his career who realizes he can't win it all by himself. That situation in San Antonio is too exciting to not have somebody want to go play with that guy. I don't think it's going to be LeBron, but it's going to be
Damian Lillard? Is that who we're talking about?
Dame is under long-term contract
Trae
in
Young?
Milwaukee.
Ooh.
Now, that's an interesting name.
Okay.
Oh, hey, we're doing the basketball.
Okay.
We're doing the basketball today.
Damon Lillard. That was Brian Windhorst on His Highness's Pat McAfee show yesterday. And he continues to trumpet the Spurs horn.
I love the idea of Trae Young
Do we?
dishing it out to win.
Is it?
Yes.
Do we love Trae Young just because he's the first opportunity? He's the first halfway. He's an 8 winking at us, a solid 7 winking at us when we're fully capable of a 9.
I don't know how, and I don't mean to make this about something else, but I don't know how you can fawn over the idea of Zeke Elliott returning to the Cowboys, but you're like
Entirely
Trae
different
Young,
scenario.
I
Entirely.
mean,
Photo negative.
I don't know
scenario.
that it's photo negative.
Oh, it's the beginning of one thing and the end of another. It is indeed a photo negative scenario.
But the idea that there's any reason we should be picky is ridiculous.
Oh, we have every reason to be. We got more money than anybody else. We got more draft capital than anybody else, and we have the next best player in the world. We got every right to be picky.
Let me reframe. Picky relative to the options. Okay.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Right? Yeah, no, there's not very many options.
The idea of we'd rather have nothing than have Trae Young.
Well, true that. And I'm not saying that nothing is better than Trae Young, but I'm just saying Trae Young is the first one to come around on the sushi boat. There might be another boat come around that fancy restaurant. You might like the next thing of sushi a little bit better. It might be the California roll. It might be the one with the swordfish. You know what I mean? Those boats keep coming. This isn't the only one that's coming. It's just the first one.
Okay, well,
by the way, I'm craving sushi.
You're calling them boats, but I'm really hungry.
Suddenly, I'm very hungry.
But we need to eat.
But see, you're right. But it's only about 4:00.
Then why did we come to the restaurant?
Well, we haven't yet. We're just in the car. We might be going to do something fun. Wow, this is a bad analogy. It just keeps getting worse. What I'm trying to get at is there's a long time between now and then. And we know that we're about to dive in to what is a supremely talented West that's going to stay that way for a minute. So we know that the first steps are going to be we're going to get beat up in the next year as this team improves. So there's really no race next year or even the next. I think legitimately looking at where the talent is and where teams are in the progression, the only teams that are going to win a title in the next 2 years are either the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Boston Celtics. Those are the only 4 teams that have any chance, I believe, to consistently compete at least over the next 2 years. And the natural life of an NBA team is about 3 anymore. So if I'm planning, and I'm planning for as fast as I can get there, I'm looking 2027 6, 7 might be exactly the sweet spot. So I'm not in a huge hurry, though I am taking interviews. And if Trae Young is a fitting fit and we interview him and he's willing to commit to some things that he might not have and might not be capable of, because consider the defensive problems you get when you bring in a little point guard like that in this ever taller NBA. He is a victim on defense. Now, he makes up for it on offense, but we know what Pop likes to coach. And while he looks pretty, he might not be, or better term, he looks good, he might not be good for us. So I'm just saying, let's not jump in too fast just because the first cute one, the first good-looking one, winks at us.
I think you're underselling Trae a little bit.
A little bit,
You know?
I am. I agree.
Yeah, like I'm not saying this is like the best.
Because I would love Trae Young. I'm saying, he's down. He's in the top 4. You're not losing a whole lot if you only end up with Trae Young. But I do know if you do your due diligence over the next year, there's going to be an NBA star that falls out of the tree. I mean, it's just he's going to get mad, going to want to get traded, and going to feel slighted, going to be a coach fired, and he's going to want out.
So I'm not at all either saying that Trae Young is a bird in hand either. There's work required.
You're right.
For the purposes of this discussion, let's assume that Trae Young is an attainable asset. This, like right now,
Mm-hmm.
versus there's a lot of ifs in what you said, or a lot of ifs, ands, buts, hypotheticals.
Very
whatever.
much.
Well, there will probably be an NBA star that shakes free from a tree, right? Like, what if that doesn't happen? And even if it does, like, what if it's not a player you feel like
True.
I love with?
True.
What if it's not a
all
ball handler?
valid.
What if it's not a point guard? And even then, okay, say like the player you want, whoever it is, does shake free, does get pissed off, does want to leave. Okay, what's to say that you're as equally desirable to the field as you are right now? Right, like, because anything can happen, anything can change. We presume that Wemby will remain this magnetic force that people will want to come into the stratosphere of. But what if that doesn't happen? What if that player just wants to live somewhere else? Right, like you just have no idea.
That
So,
would
like,
never happen. What are you talking about?
You get my point. Like, just like
I do get your point, and it is valid. Bird in the hand.
The
I get it.
hypothetical exact moment, and assuming that in the hypothetical exact moment you can do whatever you want is a fool's errand in my mind. And I'm not proposing going after Trae Young or whatever Trae Young represents right now simply out of fear of that unknown. But I think that all things have to be weighed. And again, I say this all the time when it comes to this. Do you think I remain somewhat sad for LeBron in a very small way, and that it's super unfortunate for LeBron as an all-time NBA player that he returned to Cleveland at the peak of his powers, right? Like as just this like sun, like the sun as a star level force, and that he just ran into the Golden State Warriors dynasty, right? Like the misfortunes of time, you know what I mean? That happened to line up that way.
Get in line with a lot of other dudes, though,
Yeah, well, I know, but my point is, like, you have no idea what lurks around the corner, so you cannot plan and just specifically design the exact time that you want to go after this because you think you know better. Nobody knows anything about the future.
Valid point. I will not argue and point RJ. I completely agree, and some of that it harkens back to the parable about the man in a flood praying to God for help, and a guy shows up in a boat like, here I am, and he goes, no, God's coming to get me. The guy's like, well, I'm here. They're like, okay, and he leaves, and another boat shows up and he goes, no, man, I prayed to God, God's coming to get me. And the guy's like, well, I'm here. Like, no, God's going to save me, and the boat leaves. Well, maybe this is the boat. I mean, maybe this is it. And I get that. And in a vacuum, it's Trae Young. And with Wemby, it would be a beautiful thing. But I just get the sense that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for a beautiful thing. And I don't want to dissuade making the big bucks and I say being a GM is easy. This is where the good ones are separated from the average. Make that decision. And it's going to have to be decisive. And I know that when you hear the likes of Wendy saying things and Sham saying things and others around the league saying there are players that want to come to San Antonio, there's an intent and there's a pressure behind those words. And I've said it before. There won't be anything overt from the NBA. But the league can't afford to wait for the Spurs to get Wemby's team together either. We just said goodbye to LeBron last night. This is going to be a playoffs with no LeBron, no Joel Embiid, No Steph Curry. This
no
is
KD. Well, I mean, he was in the play. Like,
Well, no KD.
Playoffs.
We
right,
are transitioning, and Wemby, if his people in his camp are in a race to be the face of the league, Anthony Ant-Man has a lead on that.
He's got the inside.
So
track.
there's pressure on the Spurs to get Wemby help. And on an even deeper note, he's going home next year. They don't want to send the Spurs over to lose to the Pacers twice in front of his home crowd. This team's got to get good for a lot of reasons above and beyond just being our team with a guy that looks like he is the best thing to ever walk down the pike to join the NBA. So there's more pressure than, hey, let's just get good for the Spurs. I think the league's on them. I think that there's pressure from the pundits. Like, dude, everybody there, you can't do the Oklahoma City thing. You're not allowed to go 3-4 years. That's not going to pay off for a league that feels itself going places right now. And they're fighting the big bad NFL every step of the way. And oh, by the way, while this sporting pie is certainly enriched, World Cup's coming in a couple years, and we're going to be fighting them for headlines. So we got a lot to take care of right now.
I think that's really well put, and that's a lot of actual non-basketball stuff.
Yeah.
But that matters to people who make decisions at this level. And you can say like, oh, the focus should be like winning on basketball games, and you're right, and that's great. But like, you also have to live tethered to reality and understand that this is also a business. And so that being said, yeah, like I mean, before we even get to the points you brought up, which are valid. I think the idea of poo-pooing, like the people who poo-poo the idea of Trae Young, I know you haven't.
No,
but
not
there
at
are
all.
some people who are like, oh, no thanks. Like, what? Like, do you not know who this team is? Like, we didn't think they were going to win 19 games a month ago. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's slow down on poo-pooing anyone around here. Like, I think it would be such a mistake to get like too up on our high horse, because a lot of what we are excited about is still hypothetical. It's still not real, right? Like there is a lot that is real in terms of Wemby and what he's offered and who he is as a player and his skills and what we've seen and the Wemby and the 5x5 and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of other stuff is still imaginary. A lot of other stuff still hasn't even happened yet. I mean, and we can sit here and we can pine for defensive player of the year and all this kind of stuff. But like at the end of the day, a lot of that stuff is just a figment of our imagination right now. And the assumption or the presumption that Wemby and Devin Vassell and Jeremy Sohan and Keldon can all get there by themselves next year is silly. I mean, it really is, to be quite frank. And even if Devin is an all-star because he's Wemby's wingman, that doesn't mean that it was the right decision. It just means Wemby's orbit got larger.
How much would you, and this is now a legitimate question, would you do to go get LeBron for a year? Because there's still gas in the tank. Now, the commitment, unfortunately, would involve probably more than LeBron. Listen to LeBron. This is him post-game after the gentleman's sweep was completed by Jamal Murray's jumper late in the game.
Tonight, was there any thought at all that this could have been your last game with the Lakers?
I'm not going to answer that. Appreciate it.
That is the most LeBron cut of LeBron's long and illustrious career, other than taking his talents, which in fact goes with that. Playing coy, come on, LeBron. We get it, but what do you think? Right now, we haven't had a chance to breathe. The fire's still hot. Is he going to be back there next year?
I think so. Ultimately,
I do too.
I mean, I don't mean this the way it sounds, but I don't think there's another team that will cater to him the exact same way. Like the infrastructure.
Oh, don't ever oversell or undersell an owner. Don't.
Well, okay, let me add. I don't think there's another team with as much sort of staying power.
Yeah, you'd have to have a pretty good stake in the game to risk the 3 years that it'll cost you of money and vacuum and all that LeBron would bring.
It's in LeBron's best interest to stay and to work on this. Like starting over and starting over only increases the pressure on him to like do it again. Like he's at a place like, I mean, you don't it's silly to like quibble about the like records and accomplishments, but like LeBron has won a title for every team he's ever played for. That changes potentially. You know what I mean? If he goes somewhere else,
especially in the short term with the Spurs,
right?
And he doesn't. Now Wemby is different. It is. You land with Wemby, things are a little bit different than anything that's ever happened before. But you do risk being Michael with the Wizards. You really do.
But he's not that yet. Like even if the Lakers continue to flounder or whatever in the like final, I don't know, 2-3 years, whatever it is with LeBron, he'll never be that. You know what I'm saying? Because he'll always have had the title. You know, so he'll never have been Jordan with the Wizards. That's one way he's able to distinguish himself. From Jordan. Not that you generally want to distinguish yourself from Michael Jordan, but you know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't think he leaves. I think it's in his best interest to stay and to continue to try to lure whoever he can to join him.
But it does kind of have to start with the premise of if he was available, would you get him? And I think that's a good Brigade Bar question. Hey, Brigade Bar, you listening to anybody out there? On 656-3776, call us, text us, type us, whatever you want. The open premise, if LeBron was open to coming to San Antonio, would you do what it took? And that might involve wasting a draft pick on his son. It might involve a 3-year deal that really you're only paying for a year. A really considered effort. But that cost might be worth the benefit of LeBron and Wemby on a world tour, which would be, indeed, a beautiful thing.
There's also a lot of ancillary benefits that come with having LeBron James on your team. I mean, that has to be considered, obviously. Yeah, again, I'm not above saying yes to anyone. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nobody that I'm not even willing to think about. So the idea of anyone just like immediately closing the book, like LeBron James, no thanks. You know, like what? You know, like you have to consider it. It's LeBron James. Yeah, I don't care what version. LeBron was awesome last night.
He was.
You know what I mean? And they just lost. I mean, but he's still what, like the 10th best player in the NBA.
I would say
worst?
Absolutely. He's all NBA. But we still feel like it is one misstep. It is one hamstring that won't heal away from months away on what it would be a very short-term clock is ticking. Paul Estrada on the Brigade Bar. Please, no LeBron. I'm not a please, no LeBron. I just don't see the benefit, the total benefit being worth the effort. We don't need a LeBron in San Antonio. We have Wemby. We don't need to bring any more spotlight. The spotlight's here. And while he would be worth wins and exposure and a lot of stuff, he wouldn't be worth that many more wins for the short term. And then there would be the cost of getting him and the cost of improving the Lakers, which no one wants to do.
It would look. I'd much rather go the Trae Young route. Like, I mean, I don't. That's why, like, who doesn't? I understand there are a lot of people who don't want Trae Young, but why not? I mean, name me your option. Name me your superstar, your all-star, your legitimate player. I'll lower the bar that low.
Well, I think Trae is probably the best of the imminently available, and I'm talking about in the next year or two, tier 1 players. But I'm not sure the Spurs actually are hunting or need a tier 1. I think they feel like we need a high tier 2, a guy that is not happy where he is, knows that there's somebody probably better on his team right now that will continue to be the focus of the franchise, but has the capability. I'm talking about guys, and I'm not talking about this guy specifically, but the Jaylen Browns of the world. And you can go through the NBA, and there's a Jaylen Brown on all these young teams that is probably as good as the star, but will never get star billing.
I think that we have that. That's Devin Vassell. Like,
I'm talking about better than Devin. I'm talking about somebody that's established in the league. And there's I don't know the name, but there's guys that are there. So I think that might be what the Spurs are searching for, because there is going to be the issue until it's hard to find guys that are willing to go, all right, I'm going to go play for Wemby, unless they have already, made their bones. They know who they are. They ain't worried about, Wemby getting more points, getting more buckets. It's about, I just want rings. I want solid home family life and rings. I don't want drama. I just want to go play. There's those guys. And then there's the superstar that are chasing the limelight, that want to feed off the Wembiness. And those guys, I don't know if you want. You know, when you hear Wendy go, there's a lot of stars that want to see the spotlight when I go play next to Wemby. Well, maybe they're coming here to improve their own brand to the detriment of ours. You know, so you got to be real careful about the motivations behind these guys that are saying, man, I want to go play with that guy. Is it to help the team or is it to help themselves?
Obviously, you can't say yes to anything and everything and everyone and any single person who hits you up, but you've got to have a kind of an open.
Is that a base concern for Trae Young?
I don't think so.
I'm not sure. I'm not saying there is, but
I'm not bothered by. I'm ready and willing to sign up for Trae Young right now. I mean, I think that maybe people would be, you know, there would be some like off-puttedness to like Devin Booker. Maybe I think people would feel that way.
I would chase Devin with everything I had.
I would still say yes. Yeah, the point you're bringing up about like, oh, maybe there's people who want to further their own brand. That's great. I mean, like, that's great to be concerned by that, and it's fair to be concerned by that. But like, the more circles we add to find the middle of the Venn diagram, the more difficult this all gets. Like, oh, well, we want somebody who's going to be like, you know, really earnest and really quiet and not going to be concerned with this, and who's going to, you know, want to work and who's going to be cool with Wemby.
We want a Spurs type, RJ.
I mean, like, I understand that, and that's really it's hunky dory. You know what I mean? but you have to live in reality, and if you're just, you know, you cannot be shallow Hal about this. You know what I mean? And that's what this disposition feels similar to. Not that you share that disposition, but like, no, we got to find this person. It's got to be this exact thing, and it can't be this old. They got to have this much, and they got to, you know, settle for this much money and this role on the team, and you know they can't have their own YouTube channel or their own podcast, and so, you know, whatever. Like, okay, well, you just got rid of like 95% of the NBA. You know what I mean? Oh, and they need to be a super talented player and an all-star. You know what I mean? What? Like, you know?
Well, I get the premise though, because the Spurs are in an absolutely unique position, the likes of which we haven't really seen before. To have a guy like him and to have all this money and all of these draft picks in the near future, it feels a bit like, not, and forgive the analogy, like you just won the lottery and you just don't know where to throw your money. I got so much money to throw, I just don't know where to throw it. And you don't want to throw it the wrong place. So, it's an RPP for sure, but it's the worst kind of problem, because the kind of mistake you could make, the dollar values are not just doubled, they're quadrupled. The effect on yourself and your livelihood, your team's future for the 5 years or whatever it might be, and the spate of the league. I've seen lots of teams collapse under the weight of the situation the Spurs find themselves, with a vast amount of talent, a lot of money, and a lot of picks. And everything went wrong. And it didn't seem like that first mistake was that big. But it was.
I understand that, but you have to also trust yourself to be willing to think your way out of problems, right? Like, you want to bring in player X and it doesn't work out. Oh, no. Well, you can't just, like, fall into the corner and cry. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to be willing and able to adjust and to adapt and to figure things out. Like, this is... You know, you mentioned this is the worst kind of problem. This is the best kind of problem. This is, you have to be ready and willing to go to work every day. It isn't, okay, we're going to assemble this team, and then we're done. And then Brian Wright, and I'm not accusing Brian Wright of wanting to do this, but then Brian Wright can, like, you know, just step aside and be done. The roster's built. Now y'all go win championships. No, like, this is, you're in this every day for all of Wemby's career.
But
this has to be constantly churning. We're LeBron is how old? You know what I mean? And we're sitting here talking about, like, what's the best position he can put himself in. He is who he is because he's treated his career like a corporation. That's what this is now. You have to approach it with that same mindset.
Yeah, but that corporation took his talents. He left.
Right. I mean, well, he didn't have the help he felt like he needed. So maybe learn from that.
That is the great fear, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe give Wemby more than Zydrunas Ilgauskas and Boobie Gibson and, you know, whatever. Like, give him a legitimate, and at least try. If it doesn't work, oh no, Rob, what's going to happen if you trade for Trae Young and you don't win the NBA championship? Oh no, we didn't win the NBA championship? Well, we have no idea what that's like over the course of the last decade.
Let's not go down that road. You know, I'm seeing across the Briade bar, and we're going to talk about those guys that are out there and the kind of guy you're chasing, because two that have crossed, one Paul George, and then I saw Jimmy Butler. That's one style of player, and I'm talking about Those are the kinds of players that you chase. I'm just not sure that's the first player that you chase. And when we next look at the Spurs, about 8:30, when we look back around the NBA, be here, because we're going to look directly at those guys like the Jimmy Butlers, the modern day, Drew Holiday, the stars that truly can help but are not the tier ones, the tier twos that might be the second type you're chasing.